I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, owners of the land where we gather today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. Today, I'm joined by Renee Coffey, who is the CEO of Kookaburra Kids Foundation. She is an accomplished leader with more than 15 years' experience leading complex not-for-profits, including the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation, Australia's largest scholarship program, complemented by an additional 7 years in the public service. Thanks for coming. Hi.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Maybe a good place to start is by explaining a little bit for anyone that doesn't know what Kookaburra Kids Foundation does.
Yeah, fantastic. So the Australian Kookaburra Kids Foundation works with young people impacted by family mental illness. So typically mum or dad or someone else in the family is experiencing a mental health condition. And we work with the young people in that family for a number of reasons. We want to make sure that they understand how mental illness works. We want to increase their mental health literacy, and we want to make sure that as they're a vulnerable population, we know they're more vulnerable in developing a mental illness themselves later in life. We want to make sure that they are demonstrating help-seeking behaviours, which means they know where to go, who to talk to if they themselves are worried about their mental health or just needing to find an ear to speak with. So yeah, that's our main work. We do that through camps and activity days, and we do online connect sessions as well. So, but always accompanied with that really good quality mental health education.
Amazing. And such important work today. You know, the fact that mental health is such a part of the conversation, which is fantastic, but having the ability for young people to reach out if they don't necessarily know where to go is so important. And that's on a national scale. Correct.
Yes, yep, we're in every state and territory in Australia, and that's been a gradual growth to that point, but yeah, absolutely in every state and territory.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing. I can't wait to dive into a bit more about what you love about working at Kookaburra Kids, but maybe we can go back to your career now and your story. I'm always fascinated by CEOs' journey from kind of where they started to where they've got to. It's never really as traditional as many people think it's going to be. Can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of where you started to where you are now?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I finished school, I got into university and I was studying at the University of Queensland, and I needed to find part-time work to kind of get by. And I had worked with, at that stage, the Australia Day Council, and they'd moved into the Department of Premier and Cabinet at that stage. And I contacted my person there, so I was 17 years old, and I contacted the guy that I'd met through this council and just said, look, I'm looking for part-time work. Back then it was folding and stuffing envelopes, making tea and coffee, filing with actual filing cabinets. And he said to me, yeah, we've actually moved into the department and I can get you a role. That would be easy. And so I started at the age of 17 in an AO1 position in the Premier's Department in Queensland. And I continued there with them while I was studying at university. Initially, I studied to be a teacher, but by the time I needed to graduate from that course, I needed to take time off to do my teaching prac. And at that stage, we didn't have kind of paid prac placements back then, and I was already kind of earning more money in the department than I would have as a first-year teacher. And so I made at that point the difficult decision not to finish with the education component, graduate with an arts degree and continue on in the public service. And I stayed in the public service for about 7 years after that.
Wow, what an interesting, you've got to start somewhere, right?
Yes.
Even if it's packing envelopes and you know, first remember the days of using paper and
Yes.
no emails, but still all of those things would have, I'm sure, aided your next step into the next part of your career, which was moving into the not-for-profit space.
Yes, absolutely. Back in those departmental days, we had file notes and Premier's briefing notes and correspondence that were in printed files, and I had to write lots of Premier's correspondence. And we had a particular Director General who would get out the red pen and give you grammar lessons all down the margins of your papers. But that kind of discipline was really good, and it was great to have that at such a young age. I also had flexibility. I worked in the events unit there. I worked in Protocol Queensland, and I worked at the Ideas Festival, which was an amazing festival that we had in Brisbane. And that gave me a lot of opportunities to work in different areas doing different things. And I found an affinity with things like marketing and communications. I really enjoyed that. But also I was able to continue my volunteer work in the background with Reconciliation Queensland Incorporated, which was a particular passion of mine. And so I was able to do both of those things simultaneously. So have enough money to live and then also be able to do my passions. And I think that the next step for me, which was the big step, was to be able to actually take on a job where I couldn't believe it actually existed at the time, where someone would pay me to do my volunteer work that I was really passionate about. So I kind of thought I'd hit the jackpot. I got a job as the executive director down in South Australia in Adelaide, heading up their state reconciliation council down there, doing Aboriginal reconciliation. And so I was able to take a paid position in a non-profit that I felt incredibly passionate about and incredibly aligned with, and do that as my day job, not needing to have kind of another side hustle on the go, which was really exciting for me.
That's incredible, and I think many people wonder how people get into positions like that, and often it does start by doing some sort of volunteer work, or working as at the same time as your day-to-day job. So you're packing a lot in, even from the early days, doing your volunteer work and working in a full-time role. But fantastic that you were able to sidestep into the industry. What were some of the differences that you think that you identified when you started working for a non-profit or a charity versus the government?
For me, it was the agility, and it was the ability. I love government and I love public servants, but for me, moving into that space, it was the agility and the ability to make decisions and implement things really rapidly, and to be able to have a discussion one day and roll out a program, within weeks. It was just quite exhilarating after the discipline of departmental life, which it can be quite regimented. It can be slow. There's lots of paperwork. There's, a lot of that, bureaucracy, I guess. Yeah. Moving into a not-for-profit, especially a small one, was really exciting.
Yeah, small ones, I think you can definitely see and implement change a lot faster, but nothing to say that there still can be quite a slow burn getting things across the line in a charity versus, I guess, a corporate.
Yes.
Having that kind of impact and change on real time, and seeing how much you're able to do. And then from that role, you moved into working with AIEF. Is that right?
Yeah, I had when I was in that role, I was selected to attend the Prime Minister's 2020 summit in 2008, and that's where I met Andrew Penfold, who's the CEO of AIEF. Andrew and I stayed in touch for a period of time. I actually didn't relocate back to Brisbane from Adelaide. I did a small little stint up in the State Library in Queensland, and over that time Andrew was talking to me. He was setting up this charity, and he'd asked me a number of times to kind of take the plunge and start working at this charity. And then, eventually I said yes, it was the right time, and I was really excited to kind of come on board in those early stages of AIEF.
Yeah, wow, I didn't realise it was so close to the beginning of the starting up of that organisation, which is now, like we said earlier, one of the largest providers for education for Indigenous people.
Yeah, when I started there, Andrew and Michelle had been operating out of their lounge room for a number of years, and they had just relocated into a new office at Edgecliff. They've since moved into Surrey Hills, but it was very much in those early days. I think there was probably about 5 of us on the books working for the organisation, and again, incredibly exciting to be involved with a charity from the ground up.
Yeah. Amazing. And that was, I guess, continuing being an executive director, now deputy CEO. Was that the position that you held your whole time when you were with them?
When I started, I came on board to set up initially it was their Pathways program. So they had the scholarship funding, and it was about setting up a new program to work with young people while they're at their schools on scholarship, to make sure that they're job ready. So that was fantastic, setting that up. And then I moved into programs director, so I was overseeing both the scholarships and the Pathways side of the business. And then I was with the organisation for 13 years. Probably about 4 years before I finished up, I moved into the deputy CEO role. So it was very gradual, and I think the amazing part about that experience was, 13 years is a very long time to work in an organisation, particularly at that point in your career. And to Andrew's credit, every 2 or so years when, it might have been a good point to move on and look for what was next, Andrew expanded my portfolio and expanded the opportunities that were available for me and what I was able to do within the organisation. And so that just put me in really good stead to get to that deputy CEO role.
Absolutely. And to sort of build on that skill set and that ability to level up and like you said, building your portfolio every year, and then have the opportunity to move into a CEO position, heading up an entire organisation. What kind of experiences do you think over your time as deputy CEO and your other executive leadership roles do you think aided your ability to move into the CEO position?
I think there's a number of things, working with teams, working with people, managing the complexity that is, and this is a space you work in, managing that, the complexity of managing people and leading people, that takes a really long time to refine, and I don't think we're ever finished. I think that's a journey, but getting those building blocks in place, I think, has been really helpful for me. I think understanding governance and understanding how organisations are structured and some of those components of organisations. That's a sophistication that often comes a little bit later in your journey, and certainly for me, doing that AICD course was really a big part of that journey for me. And I think in terms of being a CEO in this climate at the moment, it is, and Andrew had always said this to me, it is really essential CEOs have that fundraising ability as well. So it's great to have stakeholder management. It's great, I had a founding in events and communications and marketing. All of that is really helpful. People management, absolutely. But to be able to fundraise and to be able to help sustain an organisation, I think that's incredibly important. The other thing I'd say is probably that advocacy and government piece of being able to work with all levels of government and the most senior levels of government as well is really helpful. So I was really lucky to get all of that exposure through AIF.
We talked about structure a minute ago, and how AIF I know will be very different to Kookaburra Kids, because am I right in thinking you're mainly a remote working organisation?
Yes, entirely remote working. Yeah.
You're from Brisbane, and thank you for bringing the amazing weather with you today. I'm sure that's all you're doing.
Yeah, I'd already taken claim for that on our team meeting today.
So how have you adapted to that? How have you found that structure shift in terms of being, really predominantly office based and having your team around you the whole time to working remotely and online?
So I think all of us, even people who've been in physical only offices, we all had a crash course in remote working through COVID, and we all had hard lessons to learn. For those of us who weren't already doing it, it was a challenging time, and it threw up a lot of those. I'm not sure that if I had gone straight into Kookaburra Kids and straight into a completely remote working environment without having had that experience, I think it would have been a lot more difficult for me to find my footing. But I certainly had a really good experience leading teams through that. There are a number of things and I know lots of people say this, it's nothing new, but there is a real value in people, the water cooler chats, the incidental conversations, people just having a chat about their wedding, their dog, those types of things that come up when you're with someone in a physical form rather than staring onto a computer screen. And so the lessons that I'd learned at AIF and through COVID again, aren't anything new, but it is about making sure that you're giving people opportunities to connect, to socialise, to have a laugh. Tonight is the State of Origin, and so it was just a case today of us having a good laugh on the teams. I'm obviously from Queensland. A lot of my team is from New South Wales, so having some of that banter is really good. So it does take a lot of trust as well. So there's that side of things, the social side of things, particularly for people who are extroverts. I'm an introvert, so I could stay remote working forever and be completely fine. But for a lot of people, they need that interaction. But I do think in terms of managing teams remotely, it does take a lot of trust, and it requires a lot of accountability. And so it does require a sophistication of those relationships. And, that is a good thing. It's really great to have team members that you trust intrinsically and who also take that seriously and deliver because of it. So, yeah, it's a positive.
Absolutely. What is the culture like at Kookaburra Kids?
Well, we work with young people, and we have camps are the centerpiece of what we do. And so we're, Monday to Friday, generally we're all at home behind our computer screen, beavering away. But on the weekends, the majority of our team are out on program. So that means that we're at campsites around Australia. We've got 24 young people. We've got a team of 8 or 9 volunteers. We are climbing high ropes, kayaking, making slime, eating in cafeterias, running around playing laser tag, you name it.
It doesn't sound like work.
We've got a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of really good, deep conversations that our people have with the young people, which is really rewarding. Don't get me wrong, it can be challenging as well. But there's just a lot of heart. And so the people who work with us are some of the most passionate, committed people. The young people themselves are amazing, and there's just so much laughter when they're around. There's so much insightful conversations and reflections, and just a lot of heart. So the young people are really, anytime you go out on program, you're shattered because there's a lot of kind of late nights and kids not necessarily going to sleep exactly when they should, but your cup is really filled by that experience because you just see the benefit that these young people take away from our programs, and that they share with each other, and that they share with our team members and our volunteers. I think the other part of what I love is our supporters, the amazing donors, the corporate partners, the people who work in government, all of whom support our work financially, but also morally. I think the amount of times we've kind of put our hand up and said, oh, we need this, or we're looking at this, that the people who jump on board and support a charity like Kookaburra Kids, they are a really key part of what we do, and a really great, I love it. This morning I was out visiting a toy shop in Janelli. It's the Sutherland Toy Restoration Centre. They're a team of volunteers who are over the age of 60. They restore toys and sell them, and they donate the proceeds to charities, including Kookaburra Kids.
Wow.
And these are just passionate people. So I love that. It's one of my favourite parts of my job.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, who couldn't love that? That's one of the most beautiful businesses I've ever heard of before. That's divine. In terms of objectives for the future of the business, of the organisation, what's in store? What's the sort of next year or so plan?
Yeah, so Kookaburra Kids started up over 20 years ago in the Shire in Sydney, and it was a volunteer-run organisation. It was founded by this amazing woman, Diane Madden. She's just an absolute powerhouse and the biggest heart in Australia. She set up the organisation. Over those 20 years, we've grown and we've scaled. We've brought on contracts. We've got some contracts with the federal government to work with children of defence families, current serving and former serving. That's a wonderful partnership with really great results. Since I started over 12 months ago, my real mission has been about diversifying our funding even more. We started out with a program for all young people impacted by family mental illness. And what I've been doing over the last 12 months is securing some more of those partnerships, some more of that funding, getting that diversity so that we can expand our offering to even more young people across Australia. We've had some great success with that, and we are offering more programs now, which has been really heartening. So I think for us now, it's about getting more of those efficiencies in what we do. So as you scale, AIEF was built to scale in those early days. Like Andrew and Michelle knew the day they started it that it was going to pretty much, within a very short amount of time, knew that it was going to be national. And so everything was built that way. That's not, most charities don't have that benefit. Often it is, incrementally and over time. And so what we've been focusing on in the last, 12 to 18 months has been just in some instances retrofitting, but really looking at what we do. How can we improve what we do? How can we make it more efficient? How can we make sure that young people are having the best possible experiences? And that involves a lot of listening. Our team often know the answers already. So it's been, really listening to our own people about what could be better. How could we save time? How could we save money? How could we have more impact? Listening to our young people, listening to our families and our partners, and implementing those changes incrementally, just to make sure that we're doing things the best possible way. So that's a really exciting process to be in. It does mean change, and it does mean that things are shifting and moving, but that means that we are constantly improving. So that's kind of probably going to be the next 12 months, is just further refining what we do.
What are some of the qualities that you look for in your staff, or for potential candidates that you would be looking to bring on board? What are some of the qualities that they should show?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and one that we're looking at ourselves internally and really kind of delving into what is the type of candidate's profile that works well in our organisation. I think when you're working in the mental health sector, it is really important that people themselves bring a level of resilience, and that doesn't mean that we don't feel things and that we don't experience things. I went on a camp. It was probably my third camp that I'd been on. It was a particularly challenging cohort of young people who shared a lot about what they experience at home. And you've got to be able to get through that whole camp and be a positive, supportive, really pragmatic kind of support for those young people on that camp. I'll say when I got home, I cried for about 30 minutes straight, just because of the things that you hear and that you have to process through. And we've got really great EAP services that we offer, and we've got in-house clinicians who are amazing, and we're always doing debriefings and, reflection sessions. So having that resilience, I think, is really important for team members, and that ability to debrief and work through feelings. We can have them, but just that ability to be able to unpack them and move on with what needs to happen. I think, being remote working, it's important that people have got some independence there, and that they are able to kind of get on with work and be able to manage time and manage themselves and be masters of themselves. We support all of our people with that, but it's kind of good if they come with those skills already in place. But I think that the other thing is, and people self-select with this, it is really having that passion and that drive to make a difference. And you'll hear this from a lot of not-for-profits. We're not really interested generally in having people who are just there for a paycheck. It can't just be a job. We do want people who've got that passion and that drive to make a difference. And we find everyone who applies with us, we get to learn some of their story and some of their background, and you see that come through really, really strong.
Something that I noted earlier, just to wrap up this lovely conversation, is, I guess, whilst trajectories aren't always as traditional as you think they might be, I've noticed that there is a threading of, the youth space and education that's run throughout your pathway. That's obviously something that's been, I guess, that's kind of kept you aligned with the organisations that you've joined.
Yes, absolutely. I think I worked out when I was a young person that if you really wanted to change, it's going to sound naff, but if you really want to change the country, the world, you have to work with the young people. That's where we get the biggest impact. And I think that was my naive kind of simplistic understanding as a young person myself. But I think we know from research now that the earlier that we work with young people, the earlier that we have these interventions, they really do change trajectories of people's lives. And I think, thank you for noticing that's the parallel between especially my work with AIF and my work with Kookaburra Kids. It is about that early intervention. It's working with young people and giving them the tools so that they themselves can go on to lead really happy, healthy lives. I'm incredibly passionate about that.
Wonderful to speak to you and hear about your story and hear about how much impact this organisation is having on the lives of young people. Thank you so much for joining me today, Renee. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you for having me along, and especially in your beautiful offices. Thank you.
Welcome anytime.
Thanks.